And we're back.
Welcome to No Direction, the Pathfinder news, reviews, and interviews podcast. It's not a codcast. We don't have anything to do with fish. Welcome to No Direction, the Pathfinder news, reviews, and interviews podcast. I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Perrin.
This past weekend was Gen Con, also known as the best 4 days in gaming. But for us as Pathfinder fans and fans of Paizo as a company, Gen Con has a special meaning for us. It's always been a barometer for how successful Pathfinder and Paizo has been, from the release of the core rulebook to the growing amount of space that it needs for Pathfinder Society play, and now for this year for Starfinder. It's always the moment where you know just how big Pathfinder continues to grow and Paizo as a company. And so we do have a couple of people that helped run Pathfinder Society, which is a massive undertaking. If you have never seen a picture, a video, or been in that room, you have no idea just how many people are playing Pathfinder at any given time during the entire Gen Con weekend. So to help us get a perspective on just how many people there are and how big Pathfinder has gotten, we've got a couple of HQ members from the Pathfinder Society HQ staff. We've got Bob Jonquette. Welcome
Hello.
to the show, Bob.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. And also on the show for the first time, Lucas Servideo. Hi, Lucas.
Hi, guys. Thanks.
Now, we're going to introduce the two of you to our audience for people that might not be familiar with you in just a second. But first, Param has a very special public service announcement about Concrud.
Yes, Concrud is terrible. It has about taken me out this year. I have gotten it worse than I've ever gotten it. So, follow my advice that I didn't follow myself and start taking your vitamin C early, do fist bumps instead of shaking hands, and wash your hands frequently. And most importantly, do not touch your mouth or face during the convention whenever possible. That little bit of help will greatly increase your odds of surviving Gen Con. And I guess I am the knowing is half the battle section of our episode.
You're the red shirt. You're the person that is the example of what terrible things can happen. Well, Param, just personally, thank you. We could have put this show off. You would have been completely valid in requesting that we put it off. But you're here. You're a trooper. And we're going to try and get through as much of the episode as you can make it.
Right. If I suddenly faint on camera, guys, just keep the episode going. Eventually, medical services will get us back on. And then we can go. It looks like we lost a Bob. No!
We lost Bob. Oh, no. I was about to introduce Bob.
Bob. We'll introduce Lucas first.
All right, then. Lucas, hi.
Hi.
Lucas, you first came to my attention because you have cool glasses.
Oh, I thought it was because I was too loud in the kids' room back in 2012.
Did I shush you or something?
You were actually quite annoyed at me because I was being loud and yelly with the kids and trying to get their attention.
That does not sound like me, because I'm also loud when I GM.
Oh, I was obnoxiously loud.
All right. I will take your word for it and scowl.
Grr.
I've never forgiven you.
Grr, grr, grr.
But that was the first time I met you. And you were GMing like to the side. I was GMing in the center table right in front of the doors when we were right above the entrance to the exhibit hall. And
right.
Kids Track was in its own little room.
So I do remember meeting you. I don't remember specifically being annoyed at you, but it was because I met you and associated you with having those cool glasses with the swords on the
yeah,
whatever this part of the glasses is called. But that's how you first came to my attention. So as you slowly became more and more a prominent member of the, like, you're like a member of the Pathfinder Society collective, and you're a known figure, but you are known for something that I don't think anyone else is known for. You really kind of come at volunteering for Pathfinder Society at a different angle.
Well, are you talking about the journals or the stuff for the PSA and Kids Tracks that I do?
I was kind of waiting to see what you would think I was talking about, but I was specifically talking about the journal. But talk about some of the things that you have done for Pathfinder Society and to elevate the experience of going to Gen Con.
Well, for Gen Con specifically, every year with the new season, I do the journals. And so far, I've done one for, specifically starting at Season 6 was the first one I did for a season. You know, other than that, before that, it was just a generic journal. nothing in the pages. And for some people that have gotten the journals, I know both you and Param have gotten this year's journal. I am all out. I brought 60 to Gen Con. They're all gone. I don't even have a copy for myself, but I've added.
Oh.
I've added character sheets. I've added note pages, drawing pages. So if you want to draw maps, because I see people from the different Gen Con years taking notes, and I learn from what they do, what they need in the journal, and I try to modify and add every year. I've almost got it perfect.
So what are the things you've done with the journals that other, even like deluxe character sheets, haven't considered doing?
I don't know. I don't even use my own journal sometimes. But one of the things that I've added, because specifically for Pathfinder Society, is I added the season checklist in the front page. So when you open it up, it has, actually I have an older one, but it has all the races and stuff you can check off and the factions, so that all you have to do is you can do the base character here, anything that's important for the character, and then when you go inside, you'll have the character sheet and any specific details that you have going forward. And once I'm done with Gen Con and I get reacquainted with my family, because I'm away for them for a week, I share both an A4 and a US letter journal on the forums, so everybody can download and print them themselves.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. I don't know exactly when I realized just how cool your journal was. It feels like I got one just about every year, and it was just one year it really stood out as like, this is not just a character sheet with some blank pages anymore. This is something special. This is something they could sell as a product, and you just do this.
Yes, I do.
What's in it for you?
Nothing. Just giving it away and hearing stories like, hey, I created a character for season 6, and my character for season 6 is written in the season 6 journal I got there, and I've used every page and I filled in all the blank stuff. That's what's in it for me. It has nothing to do with anything else. I just like hearing the stories. Like, I think you used it last year at the special because
Yes.
you didn't have a character sheet, and I was sitting right behind you and I handed you a journal.
Yeah. So I didn't think I would be playing any games last year, so I didn't bring any of my Pathfinder Society stuff. And then I got a ticket to the special, and so I had Tina email my friend Jeff pictures of my character sheet for the character I was going to be playing, and then I transcribed from his phone into the journal, which made it a lot easier than any other alternative I had for how I would actually play that special. So you made it possible for me to play that year.
Well, I'm glad I could. As I said, I just do the journals because, it's fun. For me, anyway. I like doing the graphics. I used to be a graphic designer, and then I switched careers, and now I just do it for fun.
Well, that's awesome that for you, fun is helping other people get cool things.
Yeah. And this year specifically, I did 7 different journals.
Did you?
Yes. I did a journal for every game I played in. I did a 5-star review on Friday, so I did a special journal for that, and we were playing. Everybody at the table made up Pathfinder versions of the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon characters. So
Cool.
where the faction's favor symbol is on the regular journal, the circle is surrounded with stars, and it had the D&D cartoon characters in the center. I played Silent Tide on Wednesday with Bob, who's not here now anymore.
Yeah.
And I made a journal with King Bob from
Oh, do we have a
from the
possible Bob?
Minions. We have a possible Bob. But I made one for his game.
Sweet. So, do you do all the art for the journals too?
I do all the layout and stuff for the journals, but all the graphics and the images I find on the internet, or I try to create myself if I can.
Mm-hmm.
So, but a lot of the forms in there I've created myself. I didn't create a custom character sheet for it yet, but I would like to create a custom character sheet eventually for it's something that I like using, and that might be easier to read than the standard Pathfinder character sheet.
Param, do you want to take a minute to fix the layout?
Oh, yeah, that's the second. There you go.
Okay.
Fixed.
Oh, all right.
I'm prepared.
So, Bob, welcome back. Hopefully, we can hold on to you for a while. So, Lucas, there's other things of yours that I want to talk about, but just in case we lose Bob again, I kind of want to give Bob a little bit of spotlight. So, Bob, you've been working the HQ, I'm going to say as far back as I can remember, but why don't you give me the specific Gen Cons and PaizoCons that you've worked HQ?
I've been with the Gen Con lead team for 4 years now. And the PaizoCon team, I was not there this past year, but the 2 previous years, I was involved with the lead team.
You weren't this last year?
No, unfortunately, I was not able to make it this year. Walter Shepard, one of our regional venture coordinators up in the Northwest, was with Todd Morgan running that show for us.
So how did you get involved in the lead team, and again, what's in it for you?
It really started back when Mike Brock was still organizing for it. I just got connected with him by going up to HQ, asking if anybody needed any help, those types of things, the general thing that most volunteers wind up doing. And I think I was just lucky enough to catch him at the right moment when he needed something. So I proved myself to be a valuable resource that he could use, and pretty willing to do whatever it was that needed to be done coming into the show. So every time he mentioned somewhere in a forum post or something of that nature that there might be something going on that he was working on, spreadsheets and whatnot, I would just send him a private message and say, if there's anything I can do to help, let me know. And slowly over time, he started adding some things onto my plate, and proved myself that way. And then he just started leaning on me. And then with Tanya taking over, she just kind of continued that. I worked with her as a volunteer lead before she took over as OPC. So we already had a working relationship when she stepped into the role. For me, my original reason for getting involved was mostly because I had the typical one-off, if you want to call it, experience that many players or GMs have, where you saw things that weren't working right, people were struggling, having a hard time, and I said, I can fix that. So I just stepped up and started getting involved in it. And my primary goal is I want everyone to have the best possible time that they can have by just being focused on every touch point we have and fixing it year over year.
Do you get any time to game?
I do. I try to set some time out. This year I was able to play the Friday Night Special. It's actually a 5-star review table for one of our venture captains. So that was a really good experience. But other than that, I focus my playtime more with my local crews. And when I get to Gen Con, for me, it's more about the other players and the other GMs and the other volunteers, making sure they have a good show.
So give us an idea of, you do 4-hour blocks, I assume?
4 or 5, yeah. It depends on exactly what game you're playing, but the standard block for Gen Con is a 5-hour block. The quests pretty much mirror that. The ones in the Sagamore Ballroom do. They're the multi-part short adventure stuff that go about an hour apiece, but over the course of a 5-hour block. We've got the demos down in the exhibit hall. Those run on 1-hour blocks. And then the ACG game, the card game, runs on 2-hour blocks because they can run a quicker game. You can get 2 games in per normal slot time. And then we have our Pathfinder Society Academy, where they can run a lot of small adventures for our youth gamers in a 5-hour block. But those are really more tailored toward a 1-hour block time.
So give us an idea of what shift at HQ works for you, what your responsibilities are, and what you've learned about managing crowds, managing your time.
For me, at the lead level, it's once we get to the show, most of our work is really done. Most of our work is prep work. Once we get there, it's more of identifying what we see in the crowd. If we see a large crowd around a particular marshal, we may have to send someone there to assist. So we're more of a damage control and overview status once we arrive to the show. The individual department heads, which is a relatively new program we're using for kind of departmental supervisors, and then our individual volunteers, they're much more the down and dirty level, interacting directly with the players and the GMs.
Now, you mentioned the crowd. What was the crowd like? How many people did you seat this Gen Con?
Total seats, we sat 8,459 players over our 13 slots now that we're running, overnight slots, which was up 26% from last year. So we had a really good show from that perspective. I think a lot of that had to do with the release of the Starfinder game. There's a lot of excitement about that. We could definitely tell there was big crowds around our marshalling points for that game.
Now, just to give people an idea, the population of Sandpoint is 1,200 people. So you had about 7 or 8 Sandpoints go through the Sagamore Ballroom this week.
Yes. It's pretty exciting.
How many of them were halflings? How many elves? How many others?
Well, the halflings are good at stealth, so we couldn't really keep an eye on them, but the half-orcs were pretty prominent.
I mean, Lucas was in charge of the halflings, right, with the youth program?
Yes.
Let's talk about the youth program, and let's talk about how Pathfinder Society has, I don't want to say splintered, but it's kind of branched out to various different things, including Pathfinder Academy. So, Lucas, you're heavily involved in Pathfinder Academy, correct?
Yes.
All right,
Well,
tell us about Pathfinder Academy. What were your thoughts on it? What were the most successful parts of how it was run this year?
Okay. No, the some of the more successful parts of this year were the GMs. Having a good array of GMs that knew how to work with kids and knew how to deal with different kids and keeping their attention. And that's always been the secret to Pathfinder Academy and Kids Tracks back in the day when we were just in the room by ourselves. It's keeping the kids' attention. And if you have a good GM teaching them how to do, learn the game, they, keep their attention, and that's that main point. I know one of the people for our last slot, they got their prize tokens, and before they fought the final bad guy, the GM got all the kids from the table and ran them over to the prize booth as a break, and then ran them all the way back so that they could, defeat the final bad guy and get some energy out before they had to sit for a few more minutes.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah. And each person does their own thing to keep the kids occupied while they're waiting their turn. And that's, all depends on what the GM does. So
I wasn't sure if I was going to get into this, but I didn't play any Pathfinder Society this year, and I didn't run it, and this would be the first year that I didn't participate in Pathfinder Society in any way. And the only thing I really missed was running a kids table.
So what do you look for when you're picking GMs for the kids table? You said you had GMs that were good for working for kids. So what are the qualifications that you look for when you're saying, hey, I want you to run a table full of Regrets?
Well, we actually have a lot of teachers, a lot of kids. We have a kids librarian, fathers, scout leaders, people that have experience dealing with kids, not just some random PFS GM that wanted to come to Gen Con and go, I want a GM. Oh, all you have is PSA. I'll run this. No, we're actually vetting the GMs to make sure that we have appropriate GMs for the kids. But they have to have kid experience. They have to be good with children and know that this is a safe space for children and families to play games.
And how much does animation matter when compared to, say, rules knowledge?
Rules knowledge is not... Sorry, saying goodnight to my daughter.
Oh. Do you want to take a minute?
No, she just waved. But rules knowledge, yes, we are teaching the kids the rules, but in like the 3 different lessons, we have basic where we're teaching the kids how to roll dice. I think you ran that back. We're teaching them how to roll dice, how to get the role-playing personality down, what to do to attack, how to add the numbers. So we're doing things kind of loose and, on the fly, just to make it more fun for them. But we're capturing the basics of the game, with each of with them, not, ramming the rules down their throat. But we see kids that played Pathfinder Society Academy a couple years ago, and then now they're playing with their parents at the big tables. And
Oh, that's awesome.
And they know the rules better than their parents.
And there's one other thing you do to really, bring to, well, maybe there's many more other things to you, but one other thing I know you do for Pathfinder Academy is the cardboard cutouts, the standees.
Yes, I do that. That actually came by on an accident. I was like, what can I do this year? What can I do this year? I think I was put in charge of the Pathfinder Side Academy, and the year before I did the little design your own goblin, and then I did the coloring books, and then I'm like, what can I do to get my game next? So I'm like, oh, I did this for PAX East, and I did a big Kira and Sinjin stand-ups for PAX East, so I created small ones for Gen Con, and I had those shipped there, and I did the goblins. This year I did a Yosoka and a space goblin, and then a regular goblin and a rat folk, so all kid sizes, so they could take their picture and they could, be their characters. The thought with, when I originally did it was become an iconic, for the adults at PAX, because we have a lot of people that don't play games, so we're always teaching them the system. So we figured, the kids can be their characters with the little standouts.
And how much use do these standouts get?
Well, I know at Gen Con, I've seen a lot of parents take their kids' pictures. I see parents take their kids' pictures in them. I see the parents in there with their pictures. So I know last year we had a lot of people go through. I didn't see a lot this year. I was up on the HQ booth, helping out there. But I know I saw people behind there, getting their picture taken. I saw a couple pictures on the Pathfinder page and the Paizo page with the images. But most years people are taking pictures, they're lifting them up so they don't have to kneel down, and all the little kids love being the goblins.
Everybody loves being the goblins. The little kids are the only ones that get to be the goblins.
Pathfinder's success is entirely goblin-based.
It is.
Do you ever see any parents just trying to sneak in, on their knees and trying to get the goblin pictures taken?
Oh, yeah. Last year we had a group of 4 who walked in on their knees and asked me to take their picture because they wanted to be goblins. And last year I had the 4 goblins from the
from Weeby Goblins?
From Weeby Goblins 2 or 3. I had all 4 of those there. So
I'm glad we have to be very specific about the version of the goblins.
I know. Well, each one's different. They have different faces, and I had tried to choose ones that are with a forward facing, so they're easier to, cut out the top so the kids can look at the body and it looks right. So
Bob, Lucas was talking about the rules, and one of the other ways that Pathfinder Society has branched out is access to the rules. You've got standard and you've got core now. How many core tables do you seat, and why does it get the amount of attention that it does from your point of view?
Well, the two main features for core obviously is a kind of a rules light version. So for a new player entry, it's much easier for them to just have to focus on that one book of rules and not be overwhelmed by the thousands of pages of material that we have available to make, really expansive, awesome characters. And then the other side of it also is from the GM perspective. When they sit down at a table, they don't have to worry about a character presenting themselves with 10, 15, 20 different books of source that they have to try and understand, particularly if they're a less experienced GM who may not have read all these things or have access to all those books. So it's a really great program. Unfortunately, it hasn't caught on as well as we would like it to. Some of it is coordination, just getting people together that actually like that version of the game. Pathfinder, I think, has an advantage over many of the other role-playing games is that since it is such an expansive rule set, you can do anything and everything. If you have that really off-the-wall anime character or some old-style movie character that you want to represent, there's pretty much a way to do it within the Pathfinder rules. So that's the draw to our system. Players that want to play those simple rules, sometimes they tend to go to other games. So for us to try and draw them back, the rule set is a little bit cumbersome for them. I don't recall us having any reported core games this year at Gen Con. Core games at Gen Con this year. At this point, because of the scheduling of knowing whether or not players want that when they get to the table, we've pretty much left it up to the players to do that. So when you're marshaling or you're talking to your fellow players, if you want to play a core game, all you have to do is try to put those players together, whether it's through the forums or your local Facebook pages and whatnot. So you know when you go to Gen Con, hey, this slot we're going to play core. From the GM perspective, it doesn't matter. They prep exactly the same. So all they have to do is notate the reporting documentation that this was a core table, and it gets reported that way. So.
And what about the card game? We've seen that space in Sagamore expand and withdraw. How much space is dedicated to the card game at this point?
We had 20 tables set for the card game this year. We didn't quite fill those as well as we would like to, but it's a labor of love with that. There is a decent size community of what we would call hardcore card game players, and they really kind of prop that area up. But we're always looking for new ways to kind of sell that program. New players come in. We always have our demo tables going, and those run very, very, very well. Whether or not they transition into a regular organized play card game player seems to be a little bit more hit or miss. But if someone has not tried that, I definitely encourage that. The game is very well put together. The artwork and the materials are excellent. Sometimes it might just be hard to find it in your local area if no one is playing it publicly. Most of the players that I know of that are playing it are doing it more in kind of a home game scenario rather than going to the game store and playing it in organized play. They can still do organized play at home, but then you don't have the public visibility that you do like we get from our PFS and now our SFS groups.
And finally, something that was brand new not finally. Next point. Something that was brand new this year was the overnight slot, a midnight to or 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. Some
2 a.m.
incredibly.
to 7.
Oh, it pains me just to think about it. How was this? Was this a successful experiment?
We think so. We sat about 2/3 of the scheduled tables.
My goodness, who are these people?
Yeah. Well, over the years, we have heard a lot of feedback from players saying, "Hey, I work third shift. And when I go to Gen Con, it's a significant flip in my sleep and wake periods, and it would be great if I had the opportunity to play night." So they normally still show up for our specials because that's kind of in their wake period. But the AM slots are bad, and often a lot of times the afternoon slots. So this gives them an opportunity to play during a time that's convenient for them. So looking at about 15 tables roughly running during that slot. With a various number of 4 to 6 players. So it was. We were very worried about it going in. We didn't know how well it was going to be received, but it seemed to go off really well, and we are definitely looking at that as a something to continue next year.
Now,
and what about staffing it? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Barb.
It's like, how did it go from the GM's point of view? I mean, how did you select your GMs? I mean, was this like drawing black marbles from a bag at the point of a cutlass?
Well, we had a few GMs that were a little surprised by it because they gave us the I have no limitations volunteer status.
Fools.
And well, when I sent out the schedules, they did give me some feedback and said, basically, I didn't know this was an option, or they didn't really realize it was an option, but they were okay with it because we built the schedules in such a way that they would be able to get at least a slot off in order to go back to their rooms and sleep. Most of the other GMs were ones that knew ahead of time going into it that this was something that they wanted to do. I received a number of requests specifically to put them on overnight slots because exactly the same thing with the players. They're third shift workers or evening workers, and they didn't want to have to flip their schedule completely for 5 or 6 days just for Gen Con.
What was the atmosphere like? Were you there during the long hour shifts?
Not during the entirety. I was there during the launch, kind of the start, the marshaling period. it was I think everyone started the slot still pretty energetic from the day's events, but I did hear that most of the games finished a little bit earlier than our normal slots do. So between the players and the GMs, they probably experienced some fatigue and maybe push things a little bit more towards the end. Excuse me. But by the time I came back in at 7 in the morning, my shift was the first shift in the morning. Pretty much all the tables had completed their slots, so there wasn't running anything long.
And I would imagine that it would be harder to fill the Saturday to Sunday night slots than it was the Thursday to Friday.
From what I saw, our attendance increased over the 3 slots. You would think that it would kind of decrease because people would get tired and they would decide not to utilize their tickets or whatnot. But I think it was more of an issue of a lot of people were not even aware that it was occurring. So our Thursday night slot was a little bit light because they didn't know it was there. Gen Con was nice enough on their exhibit hall announcements to actually say that there was 24-hour gaming in the Sagamore Ballroom. So over the first couple of days, that really got spread around to people, and we saw some increases on Friday and Saturday night.
Wow. And that means that also people were running these slots after the special, which usually the specials are a massive undertaking, and it usually needs a minute to recover from, just like emotionally.
Not to mention audibly. I've GM'd the special a few times before, and I am raw at the end of that.
Yeah. Well, you may be able to hear my voice is gone, and I didn't even GM. So.
Oh.
So what were some of the specials this year?
The Thursday night special was the new Starfinder events. Not necessarily an interactive, but it did have some special features to it, and it went over real well. We had sold it out well in advance, and we wound up shifting tickets from under demand seats to increase that count. I think the final count was we sat 57 tables of that, and we had originally scheduled something like 40, something in that neighbor. So we did really well with that. Everyone knows the Friday night special is kind of the big crazy. That's the new season launch, the interactive, the numbers that I have, and we don't have the final details yet, but my preliminary numbers show that we sat somewhere in the neighborhood of about 185 to 190 tables. We may have set our room record for the most seats for a special. So that was really exciting. It went over really well. Sirenscape always supports us really well with their audio to go with John Compton's video presentation. And then the Saturday night was the Solstice Scar, which was the special that was originally released at PaizoCon. And that's it's in a new format. They're calling it modular, where it's actually going to have 4 parts. And this is just the first part that's been released so far. And then the remaining parts will build off of this one. So pretty excited about how that's going to work out as well.
Cool. I was not aware of that. I played that at PaizoCon and had a really good time with it. And from what I heard, the Friday special was quite popular.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Speaking of which... Oh, go ahead, Prem.
Yeah, I played in the special with my with the guys I brought up from Kentucky with me. From actually my ever since I've assumed venture VA, I forget the different ventures at this point. They're my GMs under me at my store, and I brought them up with me, and they played with me during the special, and it was just a really great time. I think it was one of the better organized ones that we've had, especially for I don't want to spoil it too much. Certain events happened at the climax we didn't think could happen in a Pathfinder game, and also it was I think we perplexed our GM much the way you were talking about with Core, because one of my GMs was running a gnomish, probably a fighter, but not really, riding a giant owlbear, so that was not something they were prepared to handle. And then the rest of the table was equally odd. I was the only one playing a semi-normal character, and I was just playing a Magus.
So I also did some math. If you did seat 8 people, so 7 players and a GM, At 180 tables, you had 1,440 people, which is a little more than a Sandpoint.
A little bit more.
Well, are we talking about
be...
pre-Adventure Path Sandpoint or post-Adventure Path Sandpoint? It's easier to fit those Sandpoints in after Volume 5.
We're talking about whatever the Sandpoint stat block says. So I'm saying pre-Adventure Path Sandpoint. You talked about the Thursday special was Starfinder, and we haven't brought this up, but Starfinder Society and the Starfinder Quest launched at Gen Con. So this was Starfinder hitting the ground running. This is the first time people were playing Starfinder on a large scale. Hundreds, if not thousands, of people were playing it. So what was your impression? Like Starfinder, how did the balance between the starship combat and the character scale combat work out for people?
It was outstanding. I did not hear a single player complain about any of the game mechanics. Everyone was really excited about the starship side of the game, simply because it's something that we haven't done before within the Paizo product system. So I got a chance to play the quests, and that was pretty exciting. The mechanics that we have for the various roles, pilot and engineer and whatnot, works really well. And lends itself for the format that we play in organized play. And the way they have those built really works well, because they can go back and forth between an adventure focused on characters and an adventure focused on your favorite starship. If you want to run to the Serenity, you pretty much have an opportunity to do that in Starfinder, and that's a huge appeal. So if anyone was there and watched our marshalling areas for the Starfinder game, it was pretty crazy. Everyone wanted to play. Lots of generic ticket holders hoping to get seats, things of that nature. We had them the quest running down in the exhibit hall as well. We ran 1,100 players through that over the convention. And we're guessing we run about another 1,100 players through the quests up in the Sagamore. And that's in addition to the ticketed those were all free play tables. So the response has been fantastic.
Justin Franklin does say he heard a lot of complaints from people that didn't get to play.
Well, I think that just like Paizo themselves, we did the best we could, but we might have underestimated the draw a little bit.
Yeah, we're going to be getting into that in the news section. There was a lot of underestimation when Starfinder was concerned, I believe.
Yeah, we like I said, with the special, we had originally scheduled a certain number of tables, maybe a little bit conservatively speaking, but we were trying to find a balance. We obviously didn't want to have a lot of tables that wouldn't have sold, and then they were gone immediately, and then we had to really start figuring out how we were going to meet the demand. I think we're going to be much better positioned next year. And at the other various cons like PaizoCon and Origins and whatnot, in order to meet that demand for the Starfinder game. I think we really were overwhelmed by the response to it.
Now, how do you meet the demand, though? You're basically going to have to rent out the stadium. And I'm not even joking.
Yeah, well, at this point, I can only work with the Sagamore. So as long as that remains the Paizo's room, we've got roughly 195 to 200 tables, and then it's just finding that right mix between PFS and ACG and PSA and SFS. And we definitely have some opportunities that we have watched throughout the development of the con this year, so we can definitely create some more Starfinder opportunities without negatively impacting the opportunities in our other departments.
Now hear me out. Have you considered bunk tables?
We will add that to our suggestions list for next year.
All right. Now people might get confused, so you have to have the higher tier ones be higher tier.
Absolutely.
You were talking about the Starfinder quests. You didn't get down to the exhibit hall very often, I imagine.
Usually I tried to be there around right before the doors opened, just to give them some support down there, and then pop in once or twice a day. All the leads pretty much did that during their shifts, checking in with our team down there to make sure everything was running smoothly.
All right, so then I would imagine that most of what you experience from Gen Con, and no one can experience all of Gen Con, but when you're basically in one room for the majority of it, everything else you just kind of have to get through hearsay. So what were some of the things you were hearing about? What was the buzz about Gen Con outside of the Sagamore from your point of view? Actually, let's go with Lucas's point of view. It's been a while since he's spoken. So Lucas, what were some of the things you only caught hints of, and what were the things that you found were like the persistent hints that you were hearing?
How come there's not enough seats to sit me at Starfinder tables while in the SAG? That was one of the biggest things I heard. There were people waiting in line to play the quests a second time in the free quest section because they wanted more.
Sounds like the second thing was the cause of the first thing.
Yeah. People wanted the Starfinder book was one of the other things I heard. I was down in the exhibit hall a couple times during my shifts, checking things out, making sure that the quests were down there were running fine, and people wanted the book, and they were doing going all the places that had the book, trying to win it with Lone Wolf, trying to see if their friend had a copy. So that's what they wanted down there, and that was some of the buzz I heard.
And what about you, Bob? What was some of the, on top of what Lucas was saying, what were some of the things you were hearing?
Yeah, obviously the Starfinder was the big buzz. Other things I heard about, unfortunately I didn't get to go over to the stadium and see the museum for the 50-year experience. That's probably one of my regrets from Gen Con. I really should have focused on trying to get over there and do that. I've seen some of the video spreads that people have put up on Facebook and whatnot, and it really looked like an outstanding setup that they did there. I didn't hear the thing that I didn't hear a lot of this year, what I was expecting, was I didn't hear a whole lot of true dungeon chatter, which is usually pretty common. I don't know that their numbers were up or down. I don't have anything to feedback off of that, but I just didn't hear a lot of chatter. So maybe our players just weren't going there, so we didn't hear about it in the SAG. Generally speaking, the big crowd outside of the exhibit hall at 9:59 on Thursday morning is always, it always draws a lot of interest, just to see how many bodies per square inch we can fit down in that hallway.
Yeah, I braved the other side of that door this year, and I had the camera set up about to basically brace for the charge, and it was intimidating. I had to make several will saves.
It's funny though. I had not even thought about True Dungeon, but it's true. I did not hear about it, and I don't even know if I saw ads for it. I'm not even positive True Dungeon set up this year, but it must have.
They have, yeah. I saw it when I was on the way to the go to the museum. It was inside. It was like underneath the stadium in that tunnel system before you get to the stadium, near where the anime section was set up, and they had the tavern set up, and it was pretty crowded. Bard Wannabe in chat says that it was great this year. The puzzles were very fair, and the Fae theme was a nice change. I think mainly is that they put Pathfinder people on one side of the convention, and True Dungeon is as far away from Pathfinder as you can get this year.
Okay, then I don't have to speculate on why True Dungeon might be less popular, because apparently it's just differently popular.
I mean, there was a lot going on all con. I got to see, this is the first year I really got to see a vast majority of the convention because of my various assignments, and put me at all sorts of different places this year.
All right, Param, you've got a question here, and I think only you can really do it justice.
Okay, what's the question?
It's the next one on the list.
Oh, sorry. It was... Sorry! Okay, yes. It's not Gen Con until you go home broke and with your back breaking. So, what was everybody's loot haul this year? What did you look forward to grabbing at the convention and bringing home with you? Let's start with Lucas. Lucas, what was your loot haul this year?
Well, I didn't get in there that much, through the exhibit hall, but I did get Athera and Starfinder, and I also got some Dark Eye stuff because the booth was right there with Paizo. And I got some cool minis from Red Panda Miniatures, which do anthropomorphic animals. and I got a turtle that has one arm and fights with a tower shield, and a wolf archer that I might use for a skinwalker for PFS.
Okay, this turtle. He's got a
Yes.
shell, so he's naturally armored.
Yep.
And he has a tower shield.
Yep.
What happened to his other arm?
I don't know. I didn't get a chance to read his history. That's on the back of the card that came with the mini yet. I haven't cracked any of my Gen Con stuff open.
Is it possible he's just got his arm inside and his shell acts as like a bag of holding?
Nope, it actually has a stump
Oh!
as part of the mini.
I feel really bad for this turtle.
Yeah, I ordered another one today from their mini line, and it's a gecko playing a lute, and it's pretty cool looking.
This is Red Panda Minis, you said?
Yeah, Red Panda miniatures.
I need to check them out. I wonder if
Yeah, that's something
Alex
that
has
I've-
checked them out for Kitsune.
They have a female kitsune, or no, male kitsune, and a female looks like a squirrel. So
They've got
And
some
a-
good-looking miniatures. This might be something that I'm going to have to look into and then shout out to in the near future. Thank you for bringing this to my attention.
yeah, no problem. I was actually just wandering around, and I saw. Wait a second, that turtle has one arm. And
He doesn't even fight. He doesn't have a weapon unless he's shield bashing with a tower shield. Oh,
Well-
I feel really bad for this turtle.
All right, Bob. What about you?
Well, outside of my subscription / large bag of Paizo products, we went through the Ninja Division booth. That was a big draw. They're starting to do some miniatures for the Starfinder line, and they also do the some chibi miniatures from Super Dungeon Explorer. That's something that we've gotten into here locally. Really like that theme of the chibi miniatures. Even using them for Pathfinder and things like that. There was another booth that also did chibi miniatures right next to the Paizo booth, and I don't recall the name of the company.
Impact Miniatures.
Impact
Yes,
Miniatures.
yes. I picked up a lot of
Um,
theirs.
They have some beautiful looking chibi miniatures if that's the theme that you like to deal with. Then we go through the the Chessex booths and look for dice and things of that nature. But primarily, I was interested in making sure that I got everything that was available for Starfinder before it sold out. And fortunately for me, I'm a subscriber, so my product was there and waiting for me. I didn't have to go through the risk of running in at 10 o'clock and running straight to the booth. So that was, and like Lucas, I don't get a lot of time to go through the exhibit hall. I do a lot of 3D modeling with the plaster casts. From Hearst Arts and things like that. And I went past his booth, but I didn't have a chance to go in and actually buy any new. I'm going to need some new sci-fi molds for our Starfinder games. So
That's cool. That's part of the hobby we don't really talk about, molding. Well, so you don't mold your own. You get a mold and then you fill it with plastic. I really don't know.
yeah, well, you can use plaster Paris, but something like a Merlin's Magic, which is a dental plaster, is a much better product. It's more durable, and it's still very easy to cast. Some people will go the resin route because those are even more. Theirs are very much like Dungeon, like Dwarven Forge, their stuff. So it's even more durable, but a little bit more expensive
It's
on
really hard
the
on your
creation
molds
side.
too to use the resin. It'll wear your mold out faster.
That's what I hear. But if you're doing something like ice caves or something translucent or clear, resin is the way to go.
Could I make a cake out of them and have edible dungeons?
It's a silicone
Edible
mold.
starships?
I don't. If you used a firm enough material, I don't see why not.
All right.
You kill it, you eat it.
I like it. All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. We've been going for about an hour now, which I think was a little longer than we told you. Before we go, do you have any final thoughts on Gen Con and anything you'd like to bring people's attention to? Starting with Lucas.
I actually was going to mention my friend Bobby Herring's convention that he puts on, Save Against Fear, with the Bodhana group. It helps, with therapeutic gaming with children. and that's in October. I sent you the link, and all the stand-ups and the extra coloring books for each year at Gen Con get donated to that group by me through him.
And this is already somebody that I've put on my list of people that I would like to have in a future episode. So thank you for bringing this to my attention. I think this is really cool.
And Bob, anything you want to shout out to?
Mostly it's a thank you to all the players, volunteers, and whatnot that were involved in our charity auction this year. We raised $6,450, which I believe is more than double what we've done in previous years. So that was really fantastic. So definitely, obviously no one individual person, but everyone who was involved in that, we appreciate it, and we hope that we have systems in place that will allow more people to participate in that in future Gen Cons.
Now, I don't have Sandpoint's gold limit. Otherwise, I would tell you how many Sandpoint reserves you raised in money.
That depends on whether you do the
let's
silver
say
piece
3.
to dollar conversions and whether we're talking about US
That is how I was
currency or
gonna do it, yeah.
Canadian.
Why would I do Canadian, Param? Even I know. The standard is the USD. I'm an exception, Param, and I accept my exceptionality. All right. I turned that into a pretty good compliment about myself. I am awesome. Speaking of awesome, thank you very much, gentlemen. This was great because as Gen Cons have gone on and I've been working more and more, I get to see less and less of the Sagamore, and so it's really cool to have somebody else's perspective, people that were on the floor. Actually, not just on the floor, but the view from HQ was really informative. So I appreciate you both coming on and sharing your experiences and your viewpoints.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for having us.
So we will be right back with news right after this.
And we're back.
In the Pathfinder news segment, we talk about, we're talking about Gen Con.
Yeah.
Gen Con is where all the news came from. There's so much Gen Con news, we don't even have time for the preamble. Param, start us off. What's the biggest news story of the weekend?
Oh my gosh, that depends on what you classify as the biggest, because a lot of stuff happened at Gen Con. But I think the most surprising thing was, of course, Starfinder's launch and the fact that Starfinder sold out in 4 hours.
Yeah. My goodness. So they brought more Starfinder core rulebooks than they've brought of any product by half. So they brought 150% of the Starfinder product when compared to the next most product they brought, which may have been the core rulebook. I don't know if they ever announced what the other product was, but picture anything that sold really well at a Gen Con for Paizo, they brought 50% more than that. And It sold out in the first day. It sold out in the first morning. Like, it is incredible how quickly Starfinder sold out.
Yeah, it was insane. I mean, the funny thing is like, we noticed the lines were huge, and I noticed for instance, I got early access to the hall, so I got to get to the booth right away. But just from the time it took me to walk from the line where they lined up the early access people to the Paizo booth, they had already sold out of all the limited editions. Like, those were all snatched up instantly.
Yeah,
And
that's something we should point out. They brought the limited edition and the standard edition.
Yeah, they
All
brought
gone.
they brought 100 of the limited editions, and those were gone just instantaneously, just gone, just from the early access. Then the rest of the stack was being like snapped up to the point I've got a picture of Adam Daigle standing on top of the books as he's desperately trying to put the books in place on their Facebook feed. That, again, it was a giant table made of core rulebooks, so that table had disappeared entirely by the end of the day. So it was sort of weird to see this giant empty space in the Paizo booth. It's like, what, why did you have this huge booth and nothing here?
Human pyramids.
And like, there was easily more than 100 people in line just from early access. And then, of course, the instant the doors opened, the Paizo booth was flooded. It was a sea of humanity. Again, we've got a video up on our Facebook, if you guys want to check it out, of the flood and how it just basically washed over Jason Bowman. And I hope and pray for his family that he survived this.
If there's anyone that can survive a sea of humanity, it's Jason Bowman.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Paizo had set up a second location where you could buy Starfinder, which was upstairs right outside the Sagamore, and it was either cash only or credit card only. I don't remember which one. Credit card only.
Mm-hmm.
So within a few hours, they were ferrying everything that was at that booth down to the main hall. So they had this reserved space specifically for a second place to sell Starfinder that was just empty for the vast majority of the con.
Yeah. Just a funny thing is, like, right before that announcement came out, me and Alex. Me and Alex were hanging out in front of the Sagamore, talking shop about, what was going on, what we heard about, what the news was. And we were like, man, it looks like, I think they're going to sell out. And Alex was like, yeah. And we took bets on, like, so when do we think we're going to sell out? And I was, like, being really conservative. I said, about Saturday afternoon. That's when the biggest crowd's going to hit. That's usually when things that sell out at Gen Con sell out. Alex went with Friday evening because he thought it would be more ambitious. And of course, we both didn't know it was literally 5 minutes later.
Now, we've got some people that are questioning the report that it sold out in 4 hours. So Justin Franklin says he thought it was 6 hours. Andrew Hoskins says it's before 5 p.m. I read earlier today it was before 3 p.m., which would be around that 6 hour mark. But at this point, it
depends on when you measure the start. If you measure the start of early access as the official start time, or you measure the door opening, because it was 2:30 when we got the announcement, when I marked it on the forums and shouted it out. So that's about 4.5 hours if you count the 10 a.m. start time, and it's just shy of 6 hours if you count the 9 a.m. start time.
Right, and that's a couple of hours for a 4-day weekend. Like, this clearly was a massive success. Also, Justin Franklin is suggesting that the Rune Lords card game was the most that they bought of any product at any time. That was 2 or 3 years ago.
That seems to line
and I believe
up
that
with
one
what I
also
was
sold
hearing.
out on the first day.
Yeah, that sold out on the first day, but not that fast. Not this fast.
No. So, people have been calling this a good problem to have. That's something that I want to address, but it's not the only item that's sold out.
They sold out of the Dead Suns Volume 1, the first AP. They sold out of the GM screen, the initiative tracker, the flip maps, and they also sold out of Runes of Aslant Volume 1. Now, it's worth mentioning that all the stuff I mentioned besides Runes of Aslant is sold out nationwide. There's the only place that might have copies of Core Rulebook right now are your friendly local gaming stores that just got theirs today. Some of them got them last week. But if they got from Alliance Wednesday, so basically today was when your FLGSs would have gotten most of their shipments of that product. But Paizo's gone. Paizo's sold out. Amazon still says they have some, but they're notorious for not having what they say they have. And the secondary market is already kind of popping off on this. It looks like it's probably going to be a 6-month restock time before new product hits, just from the nature of how this stuff gets printed. I do not think that this was anticipated.
Where did you get the 6-month restock time, out of curiosity?
Just overhearing what Paizo peeps were saying at the time.
Okay. I would estimate 3 months. But if you heard it firsthand, then I will assume that Paizo, well, just because of the size of the order for the restock, would take that much longer. But I would also have figured that they'd already have a second printing in mind. And anyway, I would have assumed that they would have at least figured they were going to sell out at Gen Con. Not the first day, but sell out to the point that they should have already had a second printing in the planning phases, if not already in production.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that it's there's some options on facilitating a quicker restock that they can go with, that they have gone with in the past, depending on demand. And this is certainly probably justifiably triggers a lot of the criteria of we need to get product back on the shelf as quickly as possible. So I'm hoping that it's not going to be a 6-month restock. I mean, they could go with an American printer instead of a Chinese printer and get it out faster, but then, the cost involved in that would basically eat up the profit.
Plus, like, the printer that they went with already has the plates ready. They have it in, like, it's a lot easier for them to just hit a switch and start a production. So, no, it wouldn't be worth it to go with an American printer. I'm sorry to say, that's
right. Well, it's just things
reality,
I've seen
economics.
happen in the past with products like this.
So I do want to address the people that were calling this a good problem to have, because I do want to put emphasis on the fact that this is still a problem that Paizo has.
Yeah, this is not good.
They sold out. So not only are they leaving potentially 4 times the sales or more, because the Thursday is the least attended day, even like because people with 4-day passes will often just go Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
So they could have had more than 4 times the profit that they made off of this. But an important thing to remember is that a role-playing game book is not sold to a gamer. It is sold to a gaming group through a gamer. And so every core rulebook that's not sold is one less group that's playing Starfinder. It's one less point that Starfinder can become integrated into the hobby and become the thing that people are playing. Now, there is hype based around Starfinder, so it's not like they're going to necessarily lose those people, but those are people that could be in the community, that could be building the community, and can feel ownership of the community, having been in it right from the get-go. Now, they could have subscribed, but if you're new to Starfinder, if you're new to a Paizo model, you might not realize that subscription was even an option. So
Right.
This is not as... It may seem like, yeah, this is great in the long run, but it's actually more problematic than you might realize.
Well, I'm sitting here trying to organize. I'm sitting here trying to organize when I'm going to be doing Starfinder Society with a group of players that aren't as quite connected to the Pathfinder community as, like, say, we are. Well, that'd be a tough thing to. That'd be a tough measure to measure against. But. But, you know, the people that don't have subscriptions, people that don't just follow the community intimately, they're eager to play it. And my FLGS's 6 copies that they have, 2 of which were pre-orders, is going to have to supply my entire local group for however many months it takes for a restock to happen. And, you know,
Yeah.
I'm worried about what that's going to do to the community. How is that going to stunt the growth of Starfinder Society in our area? I mean, if people can't get the book, then they're less likely to play. And yeah, I guess I can point them to the PDF, but of course, as an FLGS sponsored event, I'm not really. I mean, I'm going to really need to, when it comes, the first time that Starfinder comes up, I'm going to have to really juggle that demon on whether or not I'm going to say, hey, wait for your restock to buy it from the store that's supporting us, or, you know, for $10 you can get the PDF anytime if you want it. I imagine the PDF is going to be a lot more PDFs sold for this than the equivalent of other books.
But bringing up the FLGS, there's another point, is that what's in it for the FLGS to host Starfinder Society at this point? If you can't then turn around and say, and here's the stuff you can buy for this, then they're probably going to want to delay the start of Starfinder Society support until the second printing, because it is sold out at every level except for the distribution level. The distribution level is sold out, but then the books are arriving in the friendly local gaming stores, and I am sure that maybe half, if not most of those copies are going straight onto eBay, where they can make a much higher profit margin off the same product. Because you can't sell it in your store for 3 times cover price just because you know that's the value online. And so, again, what is keeping the friendly local gaming store from saying, you know, we sold out or we didn't get our supply, and actually just flipping it?
Well, I know some less than reputable gaming stores that do exactly that.
And I even have trouble calling them less than reputable if somebody does that tactic, because friendly local gaming stores operate on a thin margin, and this is money on the table, and it's hard to turn your back on money on the table.
It looks like the secondary market is still below retail on eBay for the standard version. For the standard version.
Really?
I imagine this is because they're still available in FLGSs. The limited edition is going for $200+ on average, though.
Okay.
Which that
I'm
seems about
surprised.
fair.
I'm not surprised that the limited edition is going for above market. It's nice that a limited edition actually sold out for once.
I hate to say that, but... You know,
Well, no, it's
true.
It's true. But I am surprised that that it's going for below market value, because that's just confusing.
Well, like I said, there's still product hitting the shelves at today. Like, the books were on the shelves today, and a lot of the early demand was probably sated from the early pre-orders and the rush of Gen Con. What this looks like in a month is going to really determine a lot of this.
Next up, Parent, probably the biggest piece of Pathfinder news is the new adventure path that was announced.
Well, would this really be the biggest? Anyway, we'll go with it.
Oh, or possibly the hardcover? All
Yeah,
right. Well,
'cause there
let's
were two
take
things
that
in-
after we talk
yeah.
about them both.
But what they are calling the conclusion of the Rune Lords trilogy, Return of the Rune Lords Adventure Path, will be launching at Next Gen Con. It is going to basically, it's being led up by James Jacobs, who led up the previous two Rune Lords Adventure Paths, and also the very first developer for Pathfinder Adventure Path. This has been his baby basically since the start of Pathfinder, and I know he's extremely passionate about telling the story. He says that if you've been paying attention, they have been planting clues about this through Pathfinder Adventures and inside of Pathfinder Society scenarios for years now. So that's interesting to go making a retrospective, trying to go back and find those clues will be interesting. It will involve finally putting to rest the problem of these Rune Lords for good. There are 5 current Rune Lords still that need to be handled that haven't been handled in previous adventures. The 2 that have been handled, of course, are famously Karzug from Rise of the Rune Lords and Kroon, which was handled during the Pathfinder Society year. Some important changes are that this will be the first AP that takes you all the way to level 20 as an assumption. The adventures themselves will be longer per volume, so still the 96 page count, but more adventure content and less back matter for these. The foes you fight will have some mythic, but the players will not have any mythic. And that's sort of the broad stroke details, without me getting super spoilery, that we know about so far.
So what I find interesting is that the pattern of adventure paths. So the theme used to be a weird one and then a standard adventure.
Right.
But with Ruins of Aslant and now Return of the Rune Lords, it seems like it's like a Pathfinder deep cut, something that someone that is heavily involved in Pathfinder lore will really appreciate, and then a more standard, broader appeal one. So I don't know if that's going to be a pattern that continues, or if that's just a coincidence with Ruins of Aslant back-to-back with Return of the Rune Lords. But the fact that Ruins of Aslant Volume 1 sold out at Gen Con, I think is a good sign that people that are still playing Pathfinder that may not be switching over partially or entirely to Starfinder are more interested in more Pathfinder-specific content. Stuff that has been hinted at, stuff that is really core to the legend of Galarian and the history of it, that's getting a spotlight. And that's a pretty cool way of handling the themes for adventure paths from going forward.
Yeah,
Again,
and it's
speculation.
worth saying that the Rise of the Rune Lords and Shattered Star and Return of the Rune Lords are all taking place in Varisia, and these are pretty typical traditional fantasy adventuring. This is fighting evil wizards and giants in a pseudo-European fantasy area. So I wouldn't even call this an out of the world one. It is definitely a deep cut, and I definitely think you're right about this being super Pathfinder specific. This is something that Starfinder can't do. I guess Rise of the Space Rune Lords is not completely out of the possibility. In fact, I imagine it's only a matter of time until we find some Aslanti, Thalassian nonsense out in outer space. But yeah, this is just going to be a standard adventure path, and I think really the weird one is Ruins of Aslant. Honestly, but actually we're going to have. Never mind, because we're going to have that Taldor adventure path that happens before this. So it's going to be standard fantasy, standard fantasy, standard fantasy all in a row.
It's true. And actually, it's Pathfinder Deep Cut, Pathfinder Deep Cut, Pathfinder Deep Cut all in a row, too. Because I would say a Taldor, like, I forget the name of the next adventure path, but it's all about assigning a new ruler to Taldor, and that's something that, again, you have to be a Pathfinder player and a fan of Pathfinder lore to fully appreciate why that's a cool theme.
I have notes on all of this. War for the Crown is the AP that's coming up after Runes of Aslant. What's going to be special about that one is it's going to be a super political and RP heavy adventure path, which has been requested for a lot. This is going to be a lot of faction favoring core intrigue. Thurston Hillman, who has worked on the first, I think is working on the first AP on this one, says that you get to level, by the time you level up to 2, you've only had 1 combat, to give you an idea of how much RP is going to be involved in this one.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's, of course, that one's also going to tie heavily into the Pathfinder Society season, which is something we haven't done in a while. Usually, for the last couple of seasons, they've kept the AP and the Adventure Path separated, but before that, they were very tightly linked with the Gen Con release Adventure Paths to the point so that, and there's a reason you would see they do that, because then they can cross support and sell products to both audiences that are both find them important. But they sort of divorced that for a while, and this is the first return back to that. A lot of what we heard is a lot of return to form at Gen Con this year. Rune Lords, we're going to relink the APs. Things like that are... so basically it looks like Pathfinder is like pulling back to some established patterns that have worked.
I would not be surprised if we finally got the quest for the Starstone as an adventure path in the near future. That always seemed like the kind of thing that was more lore than like a tangible aspect of the world. Mm-hmm. But based on the last few adventure path themes, or I guess the next few adventure path themes, I'm beginning to rethink my opinion on that.
Right, and the quest for the Starphone was brought up as something they wanted to do during the Secrets of Galarian panel, but had not yet gotten approval for. So we do know that is definitely an epic adventure that they want to write. I imagined from the talk it would be a souped-up adventure module, not quite an AP, because you'd have to start that at high level anyway. I might imagine something along the lines of an Emerald Spire or equivalent for that. But it's definitely something that they've wanted to make for a while now.
In chat, Justin Franklin has a couple of more points about the Return of the Rune Lords, and I'm not sure if you can weigh in on some of this. Mm-hmm. He says there will be more Rune Lords than we anticipate.
He said that, yes.
James Jacobs said that there will be more Rune Lord stats than you would expect. Mm-hmm. He also says, and I've asked for a clarification here, he says previous PCs from the other Rune Lords AP will be integrated. So I don't know if it means that there will be sidebars and whatnot saying, if you've already run Rune Lords and... the other one, Shattered Star. Mm-hmm. You know what he's talking about here?
Yes, there is. He said there were two things that would be supported with this. First is what it would integrate what you have done as a group with, if you've run Rune Lords, how that applies. If you've run Shattered Star, how it applies. Also, more importantly, if you haven't run those ones, who were the people that did those things? So basically, it said if the players did not run this adventure path, these are the main characters that did it in their place, so that those events still would have happened. So I imagine that's a lot of these were the NPCs that beat Karzog in the event that your players did not beat Karzog, because Karzog needs to have been beaten, because this is chronological. And there's also, he said there was going to be a article or some sort of support for running the three of them as one massive Uber adventure path.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, that sounds like it could be really cool. Really cool, guys. Really cool. He also would not commit on whether or not all the Rune Lords would be adversarial.
Oh, well, that's nice.
We don't know.
Wait, is he talking about lust?
Who knows? He would not get super specific when I pressed him for it, so...
That's curious, though. Huh. I never thought of the idea of a not evil Rune Lord.
Well, I mean,
it just seems so bad.
I think evil is still assumed.
Okay.
Right.
Not adversarial.
I mean, they're still based on sin. I mean, that's kind of how this works.
But really, how ambitious could the Rune Lord of Sloth be?
Well, ambitious enough that... he caused a ton of problems when he was defeated in the Pathfinder Society scenarios and was one of the toughest bosses in all of Pathfinder Society.
Right. So barely.
I think he's probably responsible for more character deaths than any other individual character in Society.
It's true. And that's not even on hard mode.
Oh yeah, and we also, Andrew's pointing out, we're also completely forgetting Dave Gross's Lord of Runes novel. That's another source that we're going to have to bone up on if we're going to be dealing with this.
There's also been Rune Lord appearances in the comics.
And then there's the Seven Swords of Sin module that's also extremely important. So there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, you can literally just have a Rune Lords based Galarian experience, and it would last you for years.
Well, man, it has lasted us for years. I mean,
Very true.
my players went through Rise of the Rune Lords and then went immediately into the, I forget the name of the society, Year of the Lost Rune or whatever.
The Risen Rune.
Rear of the Risen Rune immediately after that. And then Shattered Star came out, and I was like, no, we're going to take a break from this Rune Lord stuff for a little while. Just saying. We need to take a break from Rune Lords, so let's go mess with Baba Yaga. Alright, so the other big announcement for Pathfinder fans was Planar Adventures. This is going to be the next spring hardcover. This is an interesting thing. They did not, other than the Adventure Path, they did not announce anything from Starfinder or Pathfinder or the card game for next Gen Con. So that's a change of pace. Usually we know the Gen Con announcements by now, and that hasn't been made. But they did announce the spring hardcover is going to be Planar Adventures, and it's going to focus entirely on, what it sounds like. Adventures in the Outer Planes as a campaign option. They said this was going to be what they were calling a skin book, which is a set of rules that you skin your campaign with. You overlay your campaign with these planar options. And it's not, most importantly, they were very clear to say this is not just for high-level characters. They're going to introduce a series of mechanics and rules so that low-level characters can get in on their planar adventures right away instead of having to wait until you can basically teleport across all of reality before you start visiting these places.
Speaking of low level, Mark Seifter on his Facebook page has announced that the Psychocomp will be a 0 HD creature that will be statted out as a playable race in Planar Adventures.
Ooh, that's good. I like that. I like hearing that. They said that there would be 3 races. I forget the 3 specific ones on this, but the recording will go live soon-ish, and you'll be able to hear that on our streams. But the 2 important parts that they really emphasized was the low-level planar adventure, and they were going to do this by what they were calling items called planar keys, which were items and travel areas that let you travel to planes, but only to very specific points. Like the one they gave an example of was the brass key that would take you to the center of a marketplace in the middle of the city of Brass, and that is where it would always lead whenever you used it. So it would allow you to travel the planes without the baggage that comes along with the high level spells that let you basically pick any spot in all of reality to go to. That's usually bad for low level adventures. But the other thing they said that was probably part of this adventure hook that makes it very interesting, these keys are one way.
Oh.
So you need another key to get back.
And they're readily available in the City of Brass Market?
Probably not.
Oh.
Probably not. So you can see how this becomes an adventure hook right away.
Yes. Aw.
Now,
why would anyone ever go there then?
the other mechanic they wanted to really focus on was the concept of planar infusions, which are what they basically said that this is equivalent to the corruption mechanic from Horror Adventures, except for it's not a bad thing, or potentially not a bad thing, because you're not going to lose your character after these effects hit you. But basically, the more you adventure in these areas, in these planes, the more the plane starts to affect your character. The one example they give was, like, say you were adventuring in the plane of fire for a long time. Eventually, you would start to develop a natural fire resistance for your character. These would be in the forms of story feats, which are feats that are awarded, which they've explored in Ultimate Campaign before, which are just like feats that your GM gives you for story moments. So the GM would be in control of when this happens and how often this happens, but there would of course be a guideline rule system of how long you have to be in here for this to start to affect your character. And they said some of the higher level or higher infusions would even involve like getting a fire breath ability, etc. If you spent a whole long time in the plane of fire to the point that it basically made you a native outsider.
So I like that, and I especially like hearing that even though it's got some connection to the corruption mechanics, it's not just based on those, because as we discussed in our review of horror adventures, we were not big fans.
No, I like the concept of the corruption mechanics in horror
Agreed.
adventures. They just needed to slow that down a little bit. I think
Yeah.
it was just too easy to lose your character. There was too few steps, and the DCs were too high to hit for low-level characters to enjoy that mechanic. And it was sort of a flip side. Either you were low level and the mechanic was too hard to do, or you got high enough level that you didn't care anymore.
Now, so when you hear planar corruption, do you think this is kind of based on like Chaos Space Marines and the idea that you're going to another plane and it's not just you're just not supposed to be there?
Now, the corruption was only what they used to say what the equivalent. The term is planar infusion.
Okay.
But the corruption is what they just used to sort of sell the idea to us, to give us an equivalent of what it was like. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what their inspiration was, but there's tons of in fantasy and sci-fi of you're exposed to this extra magical stuff for long enough, you start to take on aspects of it. Heck, that's half of the bestiary entries.
Yeah. Now, Param, before we go on, I almost feel like I'm going to catch your con crud through the Skype connection. Are you okay to? We've got like 6 bullet points left, but they're all really quick.
Let's
Are
try
you
to
okay?
get the next one. We need to spend some time on the next one for sure.
Okay.
I only put it down as a bullet point because I was just going to pull up the product page on this one because it has a product page now. But they very stealthily announced at like the tail end of the Starfinder Q&A. Oh yeah, Pathfinder Pack Worlds coming out in spring. What this is basically their campaign setting book for Starfinder, the Pact Worlds, which is sort of an odd thing to exist, given that the campaign settings also baked into the core rulebook to a very strong extent. But that core rulebook is very crowded, and we're going to get into that when we do the review of the core rulebook in the future episode. But this is going to be the big hardcover that is going to be the campaign settings, focusing on the Pact Worlds, which is the main star system that Galarian used to inhabit in Starfinder. Emphasis on used to. It's going to have the main gazetteer, some new races and aliens and stuff, the sort of things you expect. New starships, a codex of themed NPC stat blocks, which is going to be very helpful because right now that's bad guys and NPCs are something that Starfinder desperately needs at the moment. It's a launching game. It needs lots. And
just based on this, I'm under the impression that Starfinder is going to expand more like how Pathfinder campaign setting expanded. So in the Pathfinder core rulebook and the RPG line would be like, here's everything you could potentially need to run a campaign. Here's more options, here's more, and it would just add on top. And then there were the skin books, but for the most part, it was like each new book was a new concept or just more options. Whereas in the campaign setting line, you had the Inner Sea World Guide, and then every book in the campaign setting line was a zoom in on part of that. And so I have a feeling that Starfinder, every subsequent book is going to zoom in on, because the core rulebook is loaded with options, but it's a lot of them are just kind of hints at more potential. So the future hardcover books are going to be that more potential.
I don't know yet because I got some hints at somewhat some of the future hardcover books might be based on some of the seminars I attended that did not require NDAs to be signed, and some of the stuff they've talked about.
Right.
But
I'm just going to reiterate. I said I got the impression. Like this is conjecture.
Right. I think that would be a great way to go for this sort of stuff. I think that will be a way they will definitely go when Starfinder starts getting its own softcover line, which right now it does not have. And based on the success of what happened at Gen Con, I imagine that is a temporary problem. I imagine we will very soon hear, with some of the other news that we'll be going over, we will very soon hear the launch of a Starfinder campaign setting line or similar. Now,
why don't we get into that right away then? Just move around a couple.
I think the other thing to point out with the Pact Worlds is there's a very specific line in here that I think is important. It says tons, not just some, but tons of new weapons, armors, spells, feats, magic items, technological gadgets. It looks like there's going to be a massive amount of crunch for what we consider to be a campaign setting book, and that's sort of the vibe I'm getting from this. That that would be a good thing to have, because again, we're going to go over this in the review, but one of my early impressions of the core rulebook is that it needs more crunch. This game desperately needs more support. They crammed a whole lot into one book, and there needs to be more. They put a good skeleton together, and so I imagine this will be very important, not just for people who want the campaign setting material, but also people that want crunch material that's officially sanctioned, especially Starfinder Society players. This will be an important book for them.
Now, I'm going to draw a comparison to Ultimate Combat, and I hope... I'm worried it's going to be a confusing comparison. But when Ultimate Combat came out, a lot of people were complaining about the Bone and the Stone Age equipment that was added, because it's like it was all clearly inferior to existing options, so why did it exist? And I always appreciated it because it meant that I could design in a different direction. I could design a society that was less technologically advanced. So I'm not necessarily saying they're going to do that with equipment, but that's the same idea, that Pact Worlds should expand on options that are maybe a little familiar, but should constantly be tinged on being from a different world with a different history. And like, maybe these are just smaller creatures, so their equipment would have to reflect that. Maybe this is from a race that has 4 arms, and so things would develop in a different way. So things that evolutionarily are still like touchstones of a race, but it would be a very different looking version of that same touchstone.
Mm-hmm. Maybe, yeah. If this was super, like, that would make a little sense. If this was like, remember how Inner Sea Gods was surprisingly crunchy for a campaign setting book? I could see that going, because like very themed to the planet. Like, what does my bone ships need to look like? If I have bone ships, does that mean I have bone lasers? What does a ghost cannon do?
If Pact Worlds was Inner Sea Gods, but for planets, I would be super happy with Pact Worlds.
Yeah, Inner Sea Gods was surprisingly great. I love that book. All right, so let's move on. Slowing down the hardcovers. Not hardcovers, softcovers. Pathfinder's softcover line, which was the campaign setting, which was already one every other month, and the Player's Companion, which was one a month, are now going to slow down to... They're going to switch off again. Now, this is how it was in the beginning. When they originally launched, these lines did switch off. So they're going back to that. But this definitely is like a pulling back of Pathfinder material. So we're going to have a Player's Companion 1 month, soft campaign setting book the next month, and so on and so forth. And I don't think that this includes the maps, the map packs, because those always, and I mean the campaign setting adventure path maps, because those are always on top of the normal schedule. So I don't think that those will be factored into this release schedule.
No, and this makes sense, especially because, as we learned around Gen Con, a lot of the staff had title changes, and so there's clearly some restructuring going on in Paizo, and with the success of Starfinder, they have to start reallocating or allocating more resources to Starfinder, and until they start hiring more people, that just means taking some resources away from Pathfinder, and I suspect slowing down the Pathfinder player companion line, which is effectively what this is, because like you said, campaign setting was already every other month. That opens up the resources for editors, art, and the on-staff writers to focus on supporting 2 separate games at the same time.
Yeah, and it's important. I mean, it's important that I present their version of this, where Eric Mona said during the panel that this was going to happen regardless of Starfinder, because simply they've already explored a lot of the Pathfinder design space, and there's just not as much design space to explore as there used to be. So there was less of a need for a monthly supplement for Pathfinder, but of course, it's easy to also draw the conclusion that, yes, this means more resources for Starfinder in an area that Starfinder desperately needs resources. Starfinder needs, of course, campaign setting material, but it desperately needs crunch material as quickly as they can get it. And so, hey, if they happen to free up a whole bunch of crunch capacity in the pipeline that can be directed towards their new darling best-selling game, that's really convenient.
There's a couple of good points in chat too. Andrew Hoskins points out that from the market perspective, from the perspective of someone that wants to keep buying their Pathfinder stuff but also start buying Starfinder stuff, this is easing up on their budget.
Mm-hmm.
And Justin Franklin points out that now that the RPG line is also open to Pathfinder campaign setting material, there's less need for campaign setting specific soft covers.
Right. I see
Good
that
points, chat.
There's not going to be less campaign specific soft covers. Theirs are still at the same pace that they've always been.
Well, I mean, the
Right.
player companions are campaign setting specific soft covers.
Yeah.
It's not the campaign setting line.
They've been
but it's
stretching
still-
that definition for a while, though. Those have been more crunch for crunch's sake than any other book line I can think of, even more so than the RPG line lately. Melee Tactics
Yeah.
Toolbox, Armor's Tactics Toolbox. Yeah.
I was thinking of them when you were saying that there was less design space, because it's true. It's like we've had some amazing and like root or like baseline soft covers come out in the last couple of years for the Pathfinder player companion line, to the point that like you just need a cooldown period. Like it's so much awesome that we need to stop and just reflect on this awesome, maybe build some characters that we couldn't have a couple of years ago before we get more options for more characters that we couldn't have built this year.
Yeah. And it's also worth noting that Pathfinder already puts out more material than any other competitor in the market by a factor of 5.
If not more.
Well, that's what I'm comparing it to some of their more ambitious competitors. But yeah, if we compare it to the obvious comparison, which is Dungeons and Dragons, it's more like a factor of 10.
All right, next up, Param. Pocket editions of all hardcovers are coming. New ones for every few months. And this is interesting. Starfinder will eventually get pocket-sized pocket-sized editions, but it'll only be after there's errata. That makes sense.
Yeah, this was brought up during the 2017 and beyond talk. They said that yes, they're going to be accelerating the production rate of the soft covers. It's been a very successful line. I agree. I love the soft cover tiny books. They make my life easy. They're much more inexpensive. They're easy to carry around. I feel less bad tossing them at new players than handing out my big, lovely hardcovers that have been signed by the entire design team. Those are the things I don't like to hand out to people that may not take good care of them.
That's so selfish of you, Param.
Oh, I know.
No, it's perfectly reasonable.
And of course, they're selling like hotcakes. I mean, my local gaming store cannot keep them on the shelf. They're selling out of them instantaneously when they come in, especially the core rulebook and bestiary. So the sooner we get that entire line in that option, that's the better. Also, it's not going to be a huge budget hit for me. They're $20 a book, except for the core rulebook, which is $25. That's an easy sell for me to both make when I buy and lend, and to point players at. All you need to do is buy this $20 book or $25 book. And because of the success of it, they said, of course, Starfinder is going to be getting a soft cover release soon. But there's, they need to get through the second printing and the errata and make sure they're fine with what the product is before they commit it to a new format.
All right, the Pathfinder Adventure card game is going to a setting neutral, I believe evergreen set is the goal.
Yes.
And it's not going to have such big box sets.
Yeah, they said one of the big problems with the card game is the fact that the box is so big, retailers don't like shelving it. Big boxes are harder to sell for retailers. And also, it's a big investment to buy into a very specific box set. Like, because right now, you're still using Mummy's Mask or Skull and Shackles.
There we go.
To play the adventure card game, and that's a big buy for somebody that's just joining in as a player. So the idea is there's going to be this base, this neutral evergreen core set, and then you would buy your class deck, and that's all you would need to play in the card game. And then they would release packs to add the adventures to those, much like they did with the Goblin Adventures. So, and less so of the big, huge AP massive boxes that they've been selling. And they said that it would be an evergreen box set, but here. Let me rewind that on the but they would probably update that core set every couple of years to bring it up to date. So evergreen with an asterisk, much like you would see in most other collectible card games. They usually re-release their base set every few years with updated material.
Finally, Baron, the map packs.
Yep. There was two things of map news. There's going to be more evergreen maps. So not all flip maps and everything. There's going to be more evergreens of those available, both for Starfinder and for Pathfinder, so that you have dependable evergreen maps that you can count on players having for the purposes of adventures. And they're going to change the map packs. The map packs are the little tiles, not the flip maps. The flip maps aren't changing. But the map packs are going to be called flip tiles instead now going forward. They're going to be 6 inches square and double-sided, so that they're easier to rearrange and use. They announced that. I think that that's a great change going forward. I always found the map pack maps to be awkward to use.
Yeah.
And
a lot of them really didn't take advantage of the fact that they could be configured in multiple ways. A lot of them just felt like chopped up flip maps.
Yeah. And most of them are just like, well, you can build these 5 buildings with this pack, and you don't want to mix and match it. The ones I found the most use out of were the ones that were modular, like the mines or the tech corridors or the dungeon corridors. And the other ones I found very useful were the ones that interfaced with the flip maps that had the same tile set, such as the one for the city that was basically the interior of the buildings, but the flip map was all the exteriors, so you had both of them. They could go inside the buildings, and you would just put the tile down when they opened the door. Those were very useful. So was the waterfront one for the waterfront dock, so that you could have the tavern in the entire waterfront on either side of it. Those ones I found really useful. And I still used a ton of the map packs whenever it was appropriate, but they were still... The storage was always an issue. Caping a catalog of what you had was always an issue. And of course, they're very lightweight. They blew around, and it wasn't until very recently, I guess the last couple of years, that you could ride on them. They had the same treatment on their surface that the flip maps had, so that you could actually draw on them. So but because they were the same shape and look, I never quite know which one I can ride on and not. So I usually err on not.
Sure.
So I'm all for this. This means they're going to be more modular, more easily able to use. And of course, the big problem with the flip maps was, even when they were modular, they were only modular in one orientation because of their awkward shape. They were 3x4 measurements. And with the tiles, that means, of course, they're square. You can rotate them in any direction you need them to be.
All right, Param, that brings us to the end of episode 164, Gen Con Recovery, which has to be in air quotes just from the sound of you. Maybe we'll save a conversation for our personal Gen Con experiences for another episode, because I need you to go to bed, Param. I need you to have a nice cup of chamomile tea, go lie down, and let this just get out of your system.
Yeah, I mean, I feel terrible. Oh, man. I'm going to be, after this episode wraps, I'm going to post it, and then I'm just going to, go comatose for hours.
All right. Now, I know there are a couple of important things you wanted to shout out to before we go.
The most important thing I wanted to shout out to was thanking our volunteer for Gen Con, Eric Brandon Ives and Andrew Mullen. They were superheroes this year. They covered a lot of the material. They got a lot of the convention recordings that we would not have been able to get, and they did a stand-up job. They were always there early. They always stayed late. They handled extra assignments when stuff came up, and they were real champs about it. Guys, you guys rock. We owe you one.
Excellent. And the Gen Con coverage has already started, Param. Somehow.
Yes. I put the Starfinder Adventure Path, because that was the first one recorded, and it was the easiest one for me to get to. That one went up yesterday. Today is going to be this episode, not another coverage, and then tomorrow will be another one, and so on and so forth until we get them all out there. If you got requests for any specific ones you want, I'm ready to send them in, but I can't guarantee that that's what I'll get to, because I'll get to what I get to. We're going to be trying to get this stuff up as fast as possible. Yeah. But thankfully, I learned from your PaizoCon experience, and so there's not one giant recording for the room. There's
Yes.
all the volunteers need to stop and restart the recorder between seminars. So now I can just have distinct 1 hour chunks that I'm working with.
I'm happy to hear that my pain was not in vain.
No. I heard that and I was like, that seems like a bad thing to do, and I will not make that mistake.
Good, because it was.
We will learn in the future. Hopefully, I'll be able to help you at PaizoCon next year.
Ooh. I'm not going to hold you to that, but
No, never
I will
hold
say,
me to
ooh.
that. Never hold me to that. It's always the hope that I go to PaizoCon.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to the Gen Con coverage because I didn't get any of it. So this is going to be all new material for me. And I'm pretty excited about that.
Excellent.
Until next time, I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
And if you want to find the path, you need no direction.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.